You've lived a great life and done well for yourself. But what mark will you leave on the world? How will you inspire future generations? Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand have helped thousands of people answer exactly those questions. If you've ever wondered, what will be my legacy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Stan and Katie Beth.
Welcome back to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your host, Katie Beth Hand. My guest today is transformative wellness leader, Christine Trimpe. Christine, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Katie Beth, thank you for having me. I'm really overjoyed to be here with you today.
Well, there's a lot of questions that I have, and I'm so excited about the work that you do. But for our listeners who may not have heard about you or your program, I was hoping we could start with you taking just a few minutes to tell us a little bit about your background, and then talk to us a little bit about the program that this has inspired you to create and the work that you actually do now.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I'm so excited to share with your audience today because I do come out of the corporate world. I was in corporate America for 32 years in a career of accountancy. I left there as a controller of a medium-sized physician organization. And the reason I say I left there is because I got called into this new season in life, this new calling in life. After a very dramatic health journey, I was finally able to do the thing and find a way of eating and nourishing my body well, that I was finally able to reverse 3 decades of morbid obesity. And so living through that, experiencing that, losing a little bit over 100 pounds, of course, I began to have a new passion in my life for health and wellness and metabolic health and reversing chronic disease and all those things. So I stepped out of corporate America and I have been on this journey now. I started blogging in 2018, left corporate America in 2021, and have been now a founder and full-time health and wellness coach, full-time speaker, full-time writer since that time. And I'm so excited to be here to share exactly what that entrepreneurial journey looks like and how it lines up with leaving a legacy now, which I never thought I would be saying that I want to leave a legacy.
Yes, I think it's really cool. And you really are leaving a legacy with the work that you do and the inspiration that you're giving to people. You know, this is not some random coaching program where somebody made something up. I mean, this is the walk that you lived. You actually went through this process. And so talk to us a little bit about, you don't have to go too deep into the details, but what was your rock bottom? You know, a lot of times for us, especially living here in the United States with our unhealthy American diets, there's usually, for people that turn their health around, there's usually a rock bottom or a turning point that they hit. What was that turning point? You said you had been struggling with obesity for 3 decades. What was it that made you look around and realize you had to make a change?
Yeah, I definitely, absolutely did have a turning point. And I actually call it that in my book that I wrote about this journey. My book is called Sugar Free, but very early on in the book, I set up this turning point. After 30 years of struggling, I actually was on the yo-yo dieting cycle, which so many women similar to my circumstances have been on for so long. And I went to Rocky Mountain National Park in 2015, in the fall of 2015 with my husband, and I could not climb a moderate path with him. And I actually had to beg off from continuing the journey. I was frustrated. I was gasping in air. I was exhausted. I was embarrassed. My knees were aching. And I told my husband to go on without me. And he was like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm positive. Just go on with me, out me." I needed some time alone, Katie Beth. So I sat on the side of that path on a stump. And I really just had a kind of a come to Jesus moment with myself. Like, I was 48 years old at the time and I began questioning my mortality. Am I going to be around long enough to even meet my grandchildren? And I just felt so defeated in that moment. But I remember saying a simple prayer. I just said, "God, I just want to feel better. I just want to feel better." At that point, I had given up on losing the weight and keeping it off because I had been trying for so many years. But in that moment, I feel like God did hear me. He did answer my prayer. And I left that mountainside with a new resolve, just telling myself, I cannot continue to go on like this. So when I returned from Colorado to my home state of Michigan, I did something that I had put off for so many years. I had obstructive sleep apnea that I had not had the diagnosis at that point, but I finally decided to set the sleep study, got the diagnosis, came home with the CPAP machine, which I never wanted to do because that didn't sound comfortable. But that was the first medical intervention I took to take back control of my health. And that was my turning point moment. Almost 10 years ago now. We're talking in what, July 2025. And so I'm really looking forward to celebrating the anniversary of that 10-year date because I have been walking out this health journey all that time and maintaining a healthy weight for over 7 years now.
Yes, and I love that. You mentioned this a little bit in giving us your backstory, but your faith also played a huge role in this journey. So tell us how your faith in the Lord really impacted this. And I also like that you call it a journey, because if any of our listeners have actually done this, and I know I myself have, it's not a one-time program. It's not a cutting out one food. It's not there's all of these different recommendations out there for all these different short-term fixes, and they're just not sustainable. It doesn't work. Faith is sustainable, and I know that's a huge part of your journey. So talk to us about that. How did your faith impact this health journey that you started?
Yes, well, thank goodness I came around at that moment. And I look back and I see I became a Christian. I was saved as a very young child in after school Bible club. And I was raised in a Christian family. So I had that foundation of faith, that heritage of faith, but I describe it as being very casual in my approach to my relationship with Jesus all those years. I went to church because it was the right thing to do. I took my kids to church because I didn't want my parents or my grandparents to be disappointed in me. So it was more of a checklist type of thing. But when I came home from that trip, something really switched in me. And I really believe that God grabbed a hold of me in that moment, just like what David writes about in Psalm 40, where he's talking about how God pulled him up from that miry pit, up out of the mud and the clay. And I felt like that's where I was trying to claw out of for so many years. And then David testifies about being placed on a solid rock. And I had that firm foundation of faith. But when I came home and I got that sleep study and I got the CPAP machine and I started sleeping better, I started picking up my Bible first thing in the morning for the first time in my life. And I haven't put it down since. And that's really what has helped shape my journey, grow my faith, and just help me to show up every single day to fully trust God and increase my faith, increase my joy, and just get the results that I've had. I look back and I see those 30 years. I was trying to do all of that under my own control, trying to count the points, trying to, eat less, move more, all of that. But it was way beyond my control because all of those years I was also now, in hindsight, I realized I was fully addicted to sugar and carbohydrates and overeating. And so I really credit that moment on the side of on the side of Rocky Mountain. I would never have expected that, but I came home and my life completely changed.
I think that's phenomenal. And I like that, for those of us that do have that same faith, it really is such a sustaining thing, kind of no matter what you're going through. Maybe it's a weight loss journey, or maybe it's a scary medical diagnosis, or maybe it's stress at work, but having that well to kind of dip into for inspiration and for peace and for just a lot of different things like that. I think that has been my personal experience as well, kind of getting healthier while growing my faith at the same time.
Yes.
And I don't know that there's any process in life that ever feels better than that. Physically feeling better while increasing spiritual health as well is like the dynamic duo of completely changing your life.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And one of the greatest lessons I learned in this journey is that looking back on my history, I could see that I was craving all the wrong things and I was trying to soothe myself and comfort my soul, filling all the nooks and the crannies and the holes in my soul, as I describe it, with worldly things, with food, with shopping, with, other people might be filling it with gambling or social media addiction or whatever it is. But once I realized that I was able to crave well, like God created us to crave, and I think the root of so many of our issues comes down to cravings. Are we craving these things that are not serving us well, or are we going to show up and let God work out this journey with us and learning how to crave Him? And now I crave that joy. I crave that peace. I crave all of the fruit of the Spirit, and I just crave a deeper relationship with Him. And that really truly is what sustains me every day, and how I coach the women to show up that I get to coach too. And it's so shocking to me. It shouldn't be shocking to me because this is how I live too. But to hear so many of my coaching clients say, I never really thought to invite God into this journey, into this health and wellness journey. And how often do we forget to invite the Lord into our difficult circumstances and to help satisfy those cravings that we are filling up with the wrong thing? So shocking, but not surprising. But living through it, now I have the honor to help these women identify that the things that they've been craving and are satisfying those cravings with are not serving their health well.
That is great wisdom. And since you brought up coaching, we'll talk a little bit more about your book here in a minute. I do have some questions for you on that. But since you brought up coaching, now that you've done this process and you've done things that worked well and probably done things that didn't work well and kind of crafted this journey of your own, talk to us about your coaching and what does that look like, and who is kind of your ideal client, and how does that process work? If there's some of our listeners that are having this same struggle and they're inspired by your story, what does getting into coaching with you really look like?
Oh, awesome question. Thank you for asking me that, because I'm so blessed that my ideal client is what I call old Christine. It's my former self. It was the career woman that showed up to work, that ate the standard American diet for lunch and wanted to crash in her office and take a nap at 2 o'clock because my blood sugar was crashing, right? Had I known what I know now, eating healthy would have prevented that. But I just woke up every single day feeling exhausted and feeling like, how soon can I get back home from work and crawl back into bed? And how can I comfort myself with food? How can I soothe these emotions that are out of control? I just lived that way for so long. I call it being bound in the sugar shackles because, first of all, I was addicted to sugar and the standard American diet, and just it shackled me. It piled on guilt, it piled on shame. So I went through this journey and it wasn't easy. It was indeed one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I warn my coaching clients that this is going to be one of the hardest but most worthwhile things you ever do. But I look back on this journey that God led me on step by step by step, and I developed the sugar-free method. And it combines the aspects of our health, our physical health, our emotional health, and most importantly, our spiritual health. And we go through the 5 pillars of the sugar-free method to help women break free of these sugar shackles and live in freedom. That's what the freed is in sugar-freed. And the 5 pillars are food, fasting, feelings, fitness, fellowship, and it's all grounded in faith.
That's awesome. And I love that it's such a well-rounded, kind of holistic approach to health. Obviously, as more information comes out, we're starting to see, kind of for our generation and younger, how much mental and spiritual health actually impacts your physical well-being. And I feel like when I was growing up, that's not really a thing that people equated one with another. But obviously, stress eating and a lot of these things, these bad habits, these cycles that we get into are very damaging. And a lot of that stems from maybe emotional health or extra stress and things like that. So I love that your approach is not just about food or just about dieting. It's really a holistic approach on overall, are we healthy? Are we a healthy person? Are we keeping the temple that God has given us healthy the whole way around? So I love that approach, that holistic approach to health.
Right. And and that is what I learned in hindsight as I'm going through this journey. It was so eye-opening to me that once I stopped so much focusing on the calories and the eating more and the moving, eating less and moving more, and started really feeling emotionally healthy and spiritually growing, I was like, wow, God created us body, mind, heart, soul, spirit. And for us to pay attention to every aspect of that part of our being really does make us more well-rounded, healthy, and allows us to live a lifestyle where we get to show up and we crave well and we choose well and we care well for this temple that God has given us.
That is very cool. So talk to us a little bit about, we've talked about kind of some of the more emotional, spiritual things, but when it comes to eating, what are some of your recommendations? Does that change like client by client? Is there a certain type of program or diet that you recommend to all of your clients? I want to hear that about the food pillar and then about the fitness pillar as well, what your recommendations are and how that kind of works for clients that come to you.
Right. Well, it was really shocking to me when I set out on this health and wellness journey. After I was diagnosed with the obstructive sleep apnea, a couple weeks later, I was having painful ovarian cyst, and through an ultrasound, it was also discovered that I had fatty liver disease, which I'd heard of, but I really didn't know a lot about. So I went down this rabbit hole and I learned so much about sugar that it was eye-opening. And I immediately knew that I had to eliminate sugar from my lifestyle if I wanted to begin healing. Sugar drives disease, and it also is a major hormone disruptor. And I learned about my insulin hormone being my fat storing hormone. I learned that my insulin was so out of whack. I already knew I was diagnosed with insulin resistance and pre-diabetes. So I really began to pay attention to what I was putting in my mouth, Katie Beth, and that really is was so eye-opening to me because for so long I was told everything in moderation. Well, that doesn't work for someone who's insulin resistant, a sugar addict. Everything in moderation wakes up that brain disease, the sugar addiction, and it just wants you wanting more. And then it you overindulge, and then you feel like a failure, and then you pile on the guilt and the shame. It's just a vicious cycle that I lived in for 30 years. So breaking free from that sugar addiction was key. And I always encourage, like, the one thing in my program that is super important is getting off of the sugar. It's getting off sugar and the highly refined carbohydrates. The diet, the standard American diet, which recommends 55% of your plate be filled with carbohydrates, that did not serve me well, and it doesn't serve people well that have insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So yeah, just learning something different and having an open mind to examining the food that's on our plate and just like taking action. Like, it was not enough just to learn that sugar was driving disease. It was me actually having to show up and make the difficult decision to push through and give up sugar and live the sugar-free lifestyle.
It's so interesting. So I told you before we started recording today, I have type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I feel like I am more aware probably than the general public on the impact of sugar because I
Yes.
wear a continuous glucose monitor. So I can watch in real time when I eat something that is full of those carbohydrates, when I'm not balancing it out with fiber and protein, when I'm eating something, some of those quote unquote bad foods, the slice of birthday cake, or I mean, I can watch my numbers go haywire no
Yes.
matter how much insulin I pour in. My body can't keep up with it. And
Yeah.
so I do feel like I'm a little bit more aware, and I would like to publicly attest to the fact that you are correct. The sugar in our diets, and it's sneaky sugar sometimes too. I'm really not a huge sugar, like I don't eat a lot of cake or candy and things like that. But in the American diet, and I'm sure this is something you probably have to educate clients on, lots of our savory foods have sugar in them. Most of our carbohydrates are not good carbohydrates. They're those simple starches that your body
Yes.
turns straight into sugar. And there's just a lot of education out there that the average public doesn't know. And so I like that that's part of your program, is really educating them on the sugar thing. Talk to me about movement. What are your recommended exercise plan? Is it different based by client, or do you have some standard recommendations that you give to everybody? Tell us all of your secrets.
Okay. Well, I never liked to exercise that much, being morbidly obese, as evidenced by that hike I took and I couldn't climb up the path. So very early in my journey, I told my cardiologist, I have a cardiologist, not because I have heart disease, but because my family history. I told him I quit sugar, and he was like, that's amazing. And then he said something like, you're going to want to start moving your body as you start feeling better. And he said, it's 95% what goes in your mouth and 5% movement. And from that point on, I started calling it movement. Like, exercise for 30 years was a bad word to me because it felt so fruitless, because I wasn't fixing what I needed to fix first. Was first and foremost what was going into my mouth. But I love to move my body now. Personally, I do a Fit Body Forever workout 3 times a week. I walk on the other days. And then I really encourage my coaching clients to get at least 150 minutes of movement in weekly. Some of my clients come to me well over 300 pounds, and their mobility is very limited. But I just had a client that we just celebrated her 100-pound weight loss milestone. And she is now has gone from, I met her, she was walking with a walker because she had just had hip surgery. She had very limited mobility. And now she's showing up and serving in her church at her vacation Bible school with the kids. She's getting up and down off the floor. And we're just praising God for that. That was one thing that she wanted to be able to do was to serve her church better. So it is, I do speak to my clients in group coaching about their individual suggestions, and where are you at? But let's keep moving our bodies, ladies, especially as we age. That is super important.
Yes, and movement, of course, especially as we get older, it helps stave off osteoporosis and some of those other bad things that come along with getting older. And I like the idea of calling it movement. One of the quotes I will share with you that really impacted me kind of when I was starting my health journey and figuring out this new way of eating I had to do and all of that. One of my doctors said, you can't outtrain a bad diet. And so you said the statistics that your doctor had given you, it's like 95% what you put in your mouth and 5% movement. Yes. And I think this, all of these exercise programs, and they're great. Any exercise is going to be great. Find one that you love, find one that you enjoy. But this idea that you can't work out hard enough or long enough to work off a bad diet, to burn off all of that sugar that you've consumed. And that takes a lot of self-control and there's a lot of science into it as well, and really paying attention to the numbers. So I like that you kind of brought that statistic to our listeners. Before we run out of time here in a few minutes, I did want to talk to you about, a couple of things. But one, we've sort of danced around your book, Sugar Free. You've mentioned it. And I know that listeners can even download a free sample on that from your website. But what is your book about, and what can readers really expect from that?
Yeah, so the full title is Sugar Freed, Stop Losing the Weight Loss Battle, Start Gaining the Victory, which is what we all want, ladies, especially those of us that have been in the yo-yo dieting cycle for so many years. But it's set up in 4 parts. In the beginning, we talk about resolving it. Like, why do we have to do this? Why are we here? All of the whys. Like, it's deep introspective work. And then I have a section on restoring the body. So I talk about the lifestyle, the low carb lifestyle, the sugar-free lifestyle, adding intermittent fasting or time restricted eating. It's a very practical part of the book. I talk about my diagnosis, other diagnoses that my readers might be dealing with. Third part of the book is renewing the mind, which I always tell my coaching clients, this is going to be the most difficult part of the journey, but the most important. And so we talk a lot about our emotional health and how we've, for so many years, spent coping with food and how we can break free from that. And then the 4th section is redeeming our spiritual walk, and how this has been such a spiritual journey for me. And I see it for my coaching clients as well, too. And how they just deepen and strengthen their relationship and trust God in this process, because this didn't change for me until I began trusting God for health and wellness and began showing up every day. And it is a daily surrender. And so I talk a lot about that daily surrender in that last section of the book. So putting it all together, you've got your whole and healthy self. And I talk also a lot about craving all the wrong things, and then how to crave well. And that's the free sample chapter that's available on my website. It is a little bit of excerpt of chapter 3, which is craving all the wrong things. So it gives you a lot of food for thought, like, what am I filling up on, and why am I craving these things?
That's smart. And again, I love the holistic approach, and that your book is kind of hitting on all of those different pillars, different things to think through. Very cool. Well, for our listeners, we will be sure to link that for you guys in the show notes as well. But I wanted to ask you just a couple of more questions. And so first is a personal question. And, obviously when we're talking about weight loss, the scale is a big deal, and hitting that 100-pound mark and keeping that weight off, those huge victories. But what would you say your biggest non-scale victory is?
Oh, just being able to show up and hike again. Oh my goodness. I love hiking, and I hike mountains every chance I get. When I got to my weight loss goals, my daughter and I went to Ireland, and I actually found a mountain there. We did an 11-mile round trip hike. That was the highlight of my victories of, just pursuing this health and wellness. I've gone back to that path in Rocky Mountain National Park twice so far, and I'm actually going again in the end of September for the 10th year anniversary of when I couldn't climb it. My husband and I are going to celebrate that again. So just getting up off of the sidelines of life, because I used to sit in a lawn chair and watch life go by, watch my kids involved in activities, and I would just sit there like I sat on that stump. So just being active again is my best non-scale victory.
I love that at the 10-year mark, you're going back to do that hike again, literally bringing things full circle, which is so cool. Very cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And two more questions. I know I could pick your brain all day, Christine, but
That's okay.
one is you've worked with a lot of clients and then you're a speaker as well. So you've interacted with a lot of people that are kind of somewhere along or about to get started or wanting to get started on this journey. You've had tons of conversations through all of these people you've talked to. What would you say the biggest mistake is that people make when it comes to their health and wellness journey?
Waiting, just waiting. And I understand it. I get it. It's such a difficult thing to wrap your brain around. But my challenge as a health and wellness coach, especially a Christian health and wellness coach, is because we all know we want to honor the Lord. We want to honor our temples the way God wants us to. But I need to move these women from the contemplative stage, which is where we are stuck for so long, to actually taking action. And it really truly is. I talk a lot about this in my book too. I have a heart acrostic in my book where I bring the reader into an understanding that this really truly is a matter of the heart. And part of a heart transformation is taking action and having the courage to do it. So getting women to move from contemplation to actually showing up for their health once and forever, for good and for God's glory, that's the most difficult part. And I get it. I get it because I was stuck there for so long as well too.
If you could talk to yourself 10 years ago, and you said you get to work with a lot of, Christines from the past. If you could go back a decade and talk to yourself on day one, what wisdom and advice would you give to yourself?
I would say, hold on. I have been on the most wild ride. I got to my weight loss goals pretty after I landed on, I had quit sugar for like 10 months and lost a little bit of weight. But then once I discovered like how disruptive sugar was to my hormones and adopted a low carb and time restricted eating way of eating, my weight loss happened rapidly then. And I had no idea what I was in for. But just this journey has been amazing. Once I got to my health goals, life got disrupted in so many ways. I've been through so many trials and tribulations that maintaining my health as old Christine would have been nearly impossible. I would have been in bed with the covers over my head, showing up every day and facing these trials and tribulations in good health, body, mind, and spirit, and staying solid on that rock, staying in the word every day. I guess I would have just told myself, like, hold on tight, because your life is about to get better, significantly better, but significantly more trials, which I
Yes.
never expected.
That's perfect. And that the Bible talks about how we have to worry about the worries of today and not because tomorrow will bring its own worries. And
Right.
I'm sure that that's true for all of us. If any of us could go a decade back, there's great things like the weight loss journey, but there's part of me that's thankful that 10 years ago, I didn't know all of the things coming up, the challenges that we'd
Yeah.
have, as well as the beautiful moments,
Right. Right.
life is such a winding journey, but I love the wisdom. Just hold on, buckle up. And probably
Right.
the Christine 10 years from now would look back at you today and tell you the same thing. So we probably just need to give that advice to ourselves daily and just hold on. All right,
Yeah.
final question. And this might be the
Okay.
hardest one. Through this work that you're doing, you're an author, you've been on this journey, you're working with clients, you're out there trying to educate people. What is it you hope your legacy will be?
I have a really deep passion for the fitness of the church. And I'm not just talking about our physical fitness. I am talking most importantly about our spiritual fitness, because as I've been called into ministry, as I've been called to write and speak for the kingdom, it's been apparent to me that we are not grounded in the word as well as we could be. And I get that because I did that for so long as a casual Christian. So my passion is really for getting women in the word and being grounded there. So that's my heart. That's the legacy I want to leave is. I hope that my family and my friends and the women that I've had the pleasure to coach would be able to say, first and foremost, she loved the Lord and she loved the word. And she made sure that we were always circling back to that and grounded in that. And that's the legacy I want to leave.
That is an excellent legacy and just very inspiring. And so, for our listeners, we want to thank you all for joining us. This has been the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your host, Katie Beth Hand. And my guest today was Christine Trimpe. And to get connected with Christine, you can find her at christinetrimpe.com, and we will link that for you in the show notes. And don't forget to check out her book, Sugar Freed, which you can purchase on Amazon. Christine, this was such a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to come and and let me ask you all of my questions today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Katie Beth. It was a delight to be with you today.
Thanks for listening to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more about Stan and Katie Beth, go to pinnaclelegacylaw.com. You can also find links in the show notes.